Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Pitch Masters with me, your host, Danny Fontaine. This week I speak to Ben Williams, former Marine, author of Commando Mindset and co-founder of Loopin. We talk about storytelling, being vulnerable, the benefit of making an audience feel uncomfortable, and the time that he made a pitch to try and acquire England football manager Gareth Southgate. I hope you laugh as much as I did, and if you can spare 10 seconds, leave me a review on your podcast app because it really makes a difference to me. Ben Williams, what a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm super excited about this. I've just finished reading your book, Commando Mindset, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But first, the question I like to ask all my guests is, how do you pitch yourself?
Oh, great question. There's me preparing to pitch my product or my book, and I have to pitch myself. I'm a very values-driven, authentic, vulnerable person who has nothing much more to add than not really caring what people think and go on my own journey to be ensuring that I stay true to myself. And everything I do in my life is simply true to myself. And that's how I sort of pitch myself.
Oh, I like
Which
that.
is the first time.
One of the hardest things, and I'm learning this more and more every day with myself, is, it's really hard to be truthful to yourself and about yourself and to be authentic, because it does require vulnerability. And especially when you're a bloke and in a world where you're trying to be in like a position, I personally find it really, really tough.
I actually find it quite empowering. I didn't used to. I think since having spent some time in the military, which I'm sure we'll talk about in some way or another, and doing some things in business and spending time with some incredible people, I've become quite comfortable in my own skin. I'd like to say I don't really carry too much arrogance or ego. And that's why I kind of mentioned it. How do you pitch yourself? I don't really care what you think of me. That doesn't mean I'm going to be horrible or nasty, but all I really care about is the people around me, are happy and well. And that really starts with my 2 children and my wife, and then my wider family and friendship group. And I think I'm really comfortable around those people. So I don't have too many other people to impress. I feel like I've got enough life achievements under my belt now to be very comfortable in my own skin. And actually, I think there's something, that's why I use the word empowering around, well, I'm a tattooed mid-30s white alpha male Marine. And so I see it as like a responsibility to be quite open and vulnerable. And I don't just think that from a mental health angle around how do you help young men and women speak up, but more just I think there's a stigma and an expectation of what an ex-Marine is. And, especially people like myself who have lived through the sort of war-fighting eras of, unfortunately, Iraq and Afghanistan, that we come with a stigma. And I'm quite proud to break down that stigma and just be who I am and show who I am. And I think that's quite a nice thing to do. It's okay to cry. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to laugh at yourself, which I think a lot of people struggle with. And be vulnerable for the right reasons, not being vulnerable and authentic to say I'm vulnerable and authentic and you should buy into what I do. That's how I live my life. And I say what I think, but I also listen very intently to what other people think. And that from the Marines is one of the core values was humility. And I think that's the one that stayed with me most, that allows me to, I believe, think in that particular way.
And that's really powerful when we're pitching and presenting as well. But I wonder, do you think there's a fine line between when we go and we talk to a bunch of people, either whether it's on stage or presenting to someone, we want to try and exude a certain confidence, I suppose, in ourselves. And sometimes we don't necessarily even feel that confidence within ourselves. Maybe you do, but lots of people don't. And so they almost end up masking them true selves so that they can come across as someone else in an effort to kind of sell a product. And obviously, if you go too far, you become a used car salesman cliche kind of thing. But where do you think the middle ground is there? How do you work that out?
For me personally, I think I've always been in battle with the imposter, um, which I can imagine most people sort of experience when they're pitching.
Mm.
Reading the faces. Do they like
Mm.
what I'm saying? Do they hate what I'm saying? Are they taking on board what I'm saying? Whether you're pitching a product, a service, you're stood on stage talking to people. And I think I've personally carved that experience or ability to, tussle with the imposter because they're there. They're not going anywhere. And I think if you don't get nervous or have a little bit of anxiety before you're talking to a group of people or pitching something, then there's probably something wrong. You've probably gone too far in the wrong direction where
Mm.
you're not affected by the nerves or the adrenaline rush, and that part keeps you on your game. If you're not getting nervous in battle, there's controlling nerves, and then there's using your nerves. But if you're not getting any at all, you've become numb, and that will naturally have consequences in your decision making. And I think it's the same when you pitch. Whatever you're doing, you have to ride on those nerves. I think they bring out the true character if you can channel them correctly. And going back to that vulnerability part, my imposter's always present. Only yesterday I was sat with part of the executive team from Sky talking about, how we can move or use our product with them. And that's quite an intimidating place to be. And I still think about, oh, am I going to get found out shortly? And last week I was on a panel at Bloomberg with everyone looking back from these massive tech companies asking me about the future of work and how do we structure our businesses to work in the hybrid world. And again, you're sat there thinking, well, they'll soon find out that I don't know. But you then ride that confidence, don't you? And also know you're there in that particular position for a reason. And so it doesn't really become a game of do I get found out. It's ensuring that you use your nerves correctly and adrenaline in the right way to pitch in the particular way you need to. And I love it when you asked to do this podcast, I immediately thought about, those wonderful people who are worried or scared about talking on stage. And public speaking is one of the biggest things that hold people back, career development wise. I think it's actually something that stops a lot of great managers being brilliant leaders. Public speaking is not just on stage behind some sort of mic talking to 200 people. It's also one-on-one. It's
Mm-hmm.
talking to people about their career growth and their personal life and how they're getting on. So yeah, very roundabout, long way of saying, how I channel my nerves and always battling the imposter, but using that for good rather than seeing it as some devil on my shoulder, which is telling me I'm going to mess this up. And I like that adrenaline rush. I think when it goes away, I'll have to look in different ways to pitch or do something different because that means the rush is going.
So let's get a bit more specific, because I think there are people in their early careers who listen to this and they want to have the opportunities, but they don't put themselves forward because of, I think, two of those things there: imposter syndrome, which comes with negative voices in your head, and also nerves. There's a bit in your book, and you kind of just mentioned it in a sentence, and I wanted to ask you a bit more about it. You mentioned that you used to practice in the Marines, something about before you went into battle, sort of getting rid of those voices in the head, or blocking with them, or working with them. What was that?
Yeah, so we talk about it as something called exposure equals composure. And you can never really block out the voice in your head that's saying run away or run towards it. It's there. It's how you rationalize the situation. And even simple practices such as breathing. Everyone talks about breathing, headspace, calm, take deep breaths, box breathing. But in the military, you're taught to breathe in particular ways that allows you to focus and focus during extreme situations. Because when you're taking deep breaths in, and they're not shallow, tiny breaths, but they're deep in inhaling, it is lighting up your brain in different ways to what it does when you're shallow breath, almost fear breathing. And deep breaths pausing, thinking allows that connection between your limbic system and your neocortex, where you do more rational thinking, to be able to think about the situation that's sat in front of you. And that's, some very extreme circumstances that we find ourselves in, where the consequences are very severe. And so you need commanders who aren't going to the front with the rest of the team and scrapping it out, as you can imagine maybe that would happen. They dress back, and even under the chaos of fire will not fire back. They'll assess the troop, they'll look left, they'll look right. What does the lay of the land look like? And that rationale only comes through simple techniques in deep breath work and assessing the situation and actually taking in what you're seeing, as opposed to almost peripheral blindness. And that's what makes people quite effective in those situations. And it's no different to when you would find yourself maybe talking in front of 25 executives for the first time. It's, how do I breathe in deeply and, bring rationale to the situation, as opposed to, oh, they're all judging me and this is going terribly wrong. Look them in the eyes, let them know that you're in control of the situation, what you're talking to them about, the most about. And even if they may have some feedback for you, you're the one who's up there for a reason. And look around the room and almost assess who you're talking to and breathe in and out your sentences and tiny little things like that. It's no different to combat. And interestingly, your body is in the same state during talking to people or pitching something than it is in combat. It's just in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's, you close your eyes, your body doesn't know any different. The adrenaline rush is the same. I spend a lot of time talking to teams and companies around listening to those responses as well. And when you know you're about to do a talk or you're about to say something in front of a group of individuals under demand or pressure, you naturally release adrenaline and cortisol. That then powers your limbs. And what people don't realize is when your hands get clammy and you start to clench, is you're actually preparing your weapons. That's what you're doing. You're preparing your arms to flail around and protect and fight with, or you're preparing your legs to run with. And your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, your throat, your mouth will go dry. Everyone gets the bowel movement when they need the toilet, and that's another thing, because adrenaline is shutting off those non-vital organs and it's keeping only the vital organs awake and primed. But the response psychologically is, oh, this feels unusual. I don't like this. I hate this. Run away from this, or just get through my lines really quickly, and then it'll all be over really quickly. And we listen to our body in a completely wrong way. And it's quite ironic, because you'll be in that state of adrenaline. You'll deliver whatever you deliver in whatever way you deliver it, whether it's fast paced and terrible or slow, methodical and, authoritative. Then you'll come out the back of it and you'll either go, oh, that was a car crash, but I'm so relieved it's over. And you'll have another flux of adrenaline throughout your body, or you'll come off and go, that was amazing. They applauded. I got some great feedback. Oh, what a wonderful feeling. And you get another adrenaline rush. But the psychological situation's changed because it's over, and it's probably more euphoric than anything else. You're then listening to the body going, oh, that was amazing. What a great feeling. It's like getting in the queue for a roller coaster. Oh, nervous about the roller coaster. Do the roller coaster, come off going, that was the best thing ever. But people forget that bit's on the other side of the success. But we have to prime ourselves to be able to think in certain ways. So we expose recruits, we expose trained Marines, and all the way through the rank structure under high pressured situations in training environments again and again and again and again. So when they hit combat, they're as primed as they can be, which means they're going to have more composure than if you just signed up on day one, we gave you a rifle and said, good luck, see you in a few months, and I hope everything works out well for you. And it's such a simple thing. But on that exposure equals composure, as people listening to this now who do hold themselves back from talking more, maybe it's a great example to use, talking in front of people,
Right.
or pitching in that particular way, is the only way you're ever going to overcome essentially that fear is by continuously doing it again and again and again. And that's what that exposure is. You expose yourself to the situation, you expose yourself to your physical and psychological responses, and then over time you become more composed in the situation.
Can you give us some more specific? Can you walk us through a breathing exercise So someone's about to go on stage, or maybe within the next 30 minutes, and they think, oh, everything is shutting down in my body. And really, we know it's not, but that's how you might feel. And the heart's racing, and they're thinking, I know that guy Ben said something about breathing. What's a real exercise? Can you talk us through it?
Box breathing's 4 seconds in. So you spend 4 seconds inhaling, then you pause for 4 seconds, then you breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds, and then you repeat 4 times. Now, slightly different to in combat. If I caught my commander going, you're probably going to be like, we're all getting shot at here. We're going left or right. What that breath work is far more adrenaline, heat of the moment, step back and think breath. It's just deep, take in and suck that air in and control the breath. But box breathing is something I still use, and it's great to be able to pull up examples as well. So when I left the Marines and not long worked with England football, I fortunately managed to continue doing some stuff with Gareth. I was asked to do his leadership tribute speech after the World Cup at the Savoy in front of 400 ex-professional players, press and pundits. And I got this phone call from Gareth's agent, Terry, a few months before the gig. And they'd not long come back from the World Cup in Russia. They had quite a successful tournament.
Yeah.
The Marines were quite involved. Our little team, which worked with them, were quite involved in it. There was a bit of press around it. And then I get this phone call from Terry, a proper Cockney guy. He used to look after David Beckham. He's an amazing person. He's like, all right, mate, how's it going? And I genuinely, I think it's in the book actually, I was on my balcony in my boxer shorts and a t-shirt or something. And I'm like trying to get signal. And he's like, what are you doing in the end of January? And when someone like that asks you what you're doing at the end of January, you know, your diary's wide open.
Yeah, nothing at all, mate.
Nothing, blank. At the same time, trying to sound busy. That's a fine balance. Like, I think I'm okay, but let me have a look. He's like, I've got something for you. What do you fancy to this? And he explained what it was. He was like, would you like to deliver this speech for Gareth? The FWA Football Writers Awards association are presenting him an award on his contribution to football so far. And I was like, wow, yeah, I can't turn that down. But immediately, we had months to go. Immediately, like the pressure set in and the stress and the worry. And it was going to be and still is one of my biggest talks I've ever done, or speeches. And, you know, again, that imposter turns up. It's like there's far more decorated Marines and veterans that could speak about leadership than myself. You know, what gives me the right to do it? And that voice sort of started going around in my head. And I did find actually the last month in the build up to it was quite daunting. I knew who was going to be there, and we arrived and we all got dressed up and we're on the top table, Gareth and some, you know, wonderful people who probably paid an exceptional amount of money sit on that table, and Gary Lineker. And someone said to me, who was organising the event, right, so you're going to be on after Gary Lineker. And I was like, so Gary Lineker's doing my warm-up. And they're like, yes.
Are you sure? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, is this genuinely happening? So I was like, okay. And I didn't want to do a joke, but I thought I'm going to have to sort of try and get the room on side a little bit. So that's a big one as well. Trying to do comedy when you're not a comedy person, when you're not a comedian.
That's dangerous, man.
Oh, it's so dangerous. And I'd written this joke down and it was waistcoat related. Gary went up and did his speech. And because he's done this time and time again, I wish you should have seen me. So I'm there and I felt like my collar was slightly on tighter. So I felt like my head was redder and the world was, I was just like, and all this free wine. Everyone's like, drink as much as you want, enjoy yourself. My wife is getting on it. And I'm like, no, I've got to stay sober. Otherwise I really will not get this right.
That's a good tip right there. I think you did well.
I had one just to take the edge off. That took the edge off, and then I could concentrate. And then Gary went up and he did this amazing waistcoat joke. It was just about it was something like he brought waistcoats back into fashion. And it was verbatim what I was like, hey, Gareth bought waistcoats. And I grabbed my wife's arm and was like, I looked at her and she looked at me because she's heard this speech a million times by this point. I was like, isn't it a joke? And she's like, I know. Oh, what are you going to do? So I'm sat there thinking the only good thing about my speech is this one waistcoat joke. So I went up there and I sort of scrunched my paper and like put it down. And I started to do this speech. It's on YouTube. Every now and then I watch it and cringe.
Oh, I'm going to watch that.
I'll send it to you. If you want an example how not to pitch, there it is. This is where you cut your teeth. And I'm delivering a speech. It's going really well. And then I tripped over my words and it sounded like I said the C word. So that was it. We were talking about running the England football team from the common land where we were training them back to camp. I'm going to say it really clearly on the mic. Back to camp. But what it sounded like was camp. Right? So I said camper. And then because of the way I talk, I realised that it went so quiet and cold. And the first person I looked at was my wife. And she's looking back at me and I was thinking... so you can hear me on the video go, I said camper. That's what I meant. And everyone laughed. And I thought, oh, I've got him now. That's great. It's
That's all right. Yeah.
I've got him. And then I was moving on to Gary Lineker's joke, which he'd nicked.
Yeah.
And then I just gently went through it. I was like, oh, yeah, something about waistcoats, but that's been taken. And the way I pulled it off, I had the room. They were gone.
Nice.
And by that point, I was in my flow. So my top tips are box breathing and ridicule Gary Lineker on stage, and everything else afterwards feels quite fine. But strangely, there is actually something within that. And I know this won't be comfortable for most, but if you can make the audience feel at ease, you'll naturally make yourself feel at ease. And I think that's something that I come against in a backward way. I am the Marine with the tattoos who comes on. And so when it goes deadly quiet and everyone's just staring at you, I think to myself, oh, they're judging me. But actually, probably deep down, they're all going, oh, that's the Marine. I hope you don't pick on me.
He's a bit scary.
Yeah, he's a bit scary. And so it's trying to find a way to make them feel at ease that will naturally make you feel at ease. And that might be a joke, or it might be, an icebreaker or a clever way to just make them go, you're not going to pick on me and you're not going to ask me questions.
Most people try and make the audience feel comfortable, or at least get them to warm towards them. But you do this thing called suspicious minds, right?
Yes.
And that seems kind of counterintuitive. Tell me about this bit, because I've never heard anyone try and make an audience feel quite that way before.
Well, so I have to small print this. So if you just had, one of the biggest thought leaders in the world on your podcast, I assume your listenership's probably going to considerably raise over the next few weeks. So if I'm telling all my secrets and no one wants to book me anymore because they've heard Suspicious Minds, I will pick it back up with you.
This is abundance, not scarcity, right? We're sharing everything we got.
So if you're listening and you would like to experience Suspicious Minds, this is what happens and how it works for a team. So Suspicious Minds came around from a complete, I feel nervous, I don't know what to do. I'm going to make them feel nervous. And so most talks I used to do workshopping, and I did a couple recently actually where I've done it again, where I'll introduce myself, a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then I bring up a picture of Elvis, and everyone know who this person is. It's Elvis. There's always someone who doesn't know, but maybe that's we're moving through our generations.
It's
now,
true.
right?
You can't really blame someone. He died in what, 77?
Yeah, so like some guy. And I bring up the picture, everyone happy. And I say, so basically what's going to happen next is someone will be picked at random to come up here, take the microphone off me. And the next slide, which I'll click, is the lyrics to Suspicious Minds. And it's a cappella. There's no backing music. And you're just going to have to sit there and, we're caught in a trap. And you will do the 3 minutes and 27 seconds of it. Okay, telling the audience like there's no get out of jail free.
And you're
card.
a Marine, right? They're like, if he tells me to, I'm gonna.
Yeah,
have to.
They don't. Like you're not going to do the first 10 seconds here. You're doing the full lot, and I love it. And then you just leave them with that feeling of like brilliant. So you'll get what I often get is it's usually the women as well. I love it. They'll just eyeball you and like, yeah, go on and pick me.
Oh wow.
So Yeah, all the time. And you think it's the men. It's not. It's the women. I dare you to pick me. And so you kind of avoid their eye contact. And then you've got quite a few people who will be looking at everything else but
Uh-huh.
you. And so you got those two things going on. But then what I say is, but I'm not going to pick you. You're going to be picked at complete random. And in fact, one of you's already picked yourself. And then you kind of
Oh,
see him get
man.
a bit more like, how? And then I explain, so before any of you came in this room, or if you went out for your coffee break, I put a sticker under one of your seats, and it's a round sticker that just says the word "you" on it. And in a minute, you're all going to check under your seats, and if it's you who sat on it, you'll be coming up to do it. If you're sat next to the seat with no one on and you check and it's there, you're the person coming up. And so you see people start to shuffle around and like, stop them. Whoa, hands on the tables. Anyone caught peeking will be immediately told to come up and do it. And so everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be that person. Kind of treat
This
them
is
like
harsh,
recruits.
man. I know, right?
It's harsh, but it's 5 minutes of rest for me because I'm not then sat there like, I'm getting them to be like, oh, this is worrying. And then I'll just completely long it out for about, I say 5 seconds, and it usually goes on for 30 seconds of countdowns. And they're all sat there looking at me. You see them getting annoyed and fidgety, and the bald ones you can see sweating. And then 5, 4, I get down to 1. Okay, check. And then the rumble begins, and everyone stands up and they check under their seats and they're looking around. And then one by one, you see them. You see them go from, like I said, the roller coaster, that adrenaline. Oh my God! To, oh, it's not me, elation adrenaline. Yes, sit down. They sit down. They're looking around. They're looking for the lamb to the slaughter. Who is it? Oh, I can't wait to watch them fail up there. And they join. That crowd gets bigger as more and more people are finding out it's not them. And they're all sat down on their chairs. They're all looking around, smiling and looking for that person. And then they finally clock, there wasn't a sticker. And then I make the obvious remark of, there was no sticker under your seats. And no one's coming up to sing Suspicious Minds. And there's laughter. But the whole point of it is taking them on that journey of, I have completely removed your control in the situation. Because the only thing, this is where it gets worse from, the only thing you can do next is, if it is you, during that period of thinking they're going to get picked, is the worst thing they can do is go, well, I'm not doing it. And they know deep down in that in itself, in front of their peers, they would probably be likely judged more for going, I'm not doing that, to actually going up there and getting embarrassed. So they're in this entire dilemma. I love it. It's like, it's quite sadistic, but it's my way of just putting myself at ease. But they're caught in this dilemma of adrenaline and concern and worry and panic and suspicious minds, because for the rest of the talk, they're then suspicious about me.
What's the talk about when you do this? Like,
I use it in everything. It's like my icebreaker. Right. Yeah. I didn't use it for Gareth. I didn't use it at the Football Writers Awards. There's 400 of you in here.
Gary Lineker's like, oh no.
Yeah. One of you will come up and do my leadership speech. But going back to what I said about exposure equals composure, and that adrenaline rush before a moment, then the adrenaline rush after the moment, is you use that as an example, because quite often I talk about fear. Quite often I'm talking about to teams, groups of teams, about comfort zones, and then your fear, and then how you learn and grow from there. And I use that as a point of reference. I'm like, listen now to how you're feeling, because that is what elation feels like. That is the same experience before, just psychologically it's changed because the situation for you has changed. You're not going to be coming up here to sing, but I want you to listen to how your body was feeling and thinking. And although it's funny and it's an icebreaker and it's nice to explain on the podcast, ultimately it's got a reason behind it. It gets them thinking, oh, right. And then you go a deeper level to go, now you're all managers in this room. Let's just say, for example, you have teams of 4 or 5, 6 people who experience that on a daily basis, and they're worried about talking to you. They might be worried about engaging with a particular customer, but getting in there and understanding how they think and actually experiencing how they think. Your leadership thinks like that. Your board members think like that. And it's just exposing them a little bit more to these adrenal rushes that we go through when literally caught in these traps and these moments. But I will leave you with this as well on that point. I delivered a talk up in Glasgow to a big construction company, and there was about 300 people in this auditorium, and I started with Suspicious Minds, and I'm watching the audience all shuffling around looking, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, oh, they'll all sit down soon, and then I can reveal to them that there is no sticker. And we're all sat there and looking around the room. And then there's this elderly guy walking down one of the aisles towards me, holding a sticker. And I'm like,
huh?
What are you doing? It's completely ruined my moment. He was like, it's me. And I was like, is it? And he was like, yeah, I've got a yellow sticker under my seat. And I was like, oh, that's strange. And I've had to then explain it on the fly. Oh, no one's caught. No, it's all a farce. And he was like, oh, so I don't have to sing then. I'm negotiating with him because then he wanted to sing. I was like, no, go sit back down. So, yeah, it has its flaws.
He was trying to pressure you into letting him sing, was he?
Yeah. Or there's a drunk from the night before. If it's like an AGM, there's always someone like, I'll do it. But, yeah, I was surprised to see someone walk towards me.
Wow, that's hilarious. So you've got a lot of funny stories, but you also have a lot of darker, more emotional, sad stories as well. How do you use those in a business context?
I used to do my talks right at the beginning in too much of a dramatic way. Like I would overkill the broken wing story. Like, yeah, it was horrific and you haven't been there and it's awful and all these things to the point where the audience is going, yeah, all right, we get it. And I used to overkill it. Like I've talked very openly about my past with drug problems and suicidal issues and then joining the Marines and then all the things that come with the Marines, and like almost made my talks in the early days just a bit too dark. And I think that's a very easy mistake to make when you're trying to win people over through emotion. You'll either go too comical and it's not funny, or you'd be like, yeah, everyone was dead and everything was everywhere and I was the only one left and you must all try and feel sad somehow. And that's where the imbalance happens. I think you need to give your audience just enough where they're like, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you're saying here.
Yeah.
And then you pull back. And
I think it's another one of pitching's fine line between compelling story and almost sensationalism.
Yes.
And if you're not careful, it looks like you're doing something just for the purpose of emotion, rather than I've got a really genuine story that's relevant that I'd like to tell you authentically.
And I've struggled with this definitely at the beginning, since leaving the Marines and going into public speaking of sorts, and way less so now. But I had some pretty unique life experiences within quite a short space of time. Before the Marines, a lot happened there, which I've written about. A lot happened in the Marines, and then quite a substantial amounts happened after the Marines. And everyone's got their story, and that's why, again, I can feel myself doing it now. Like, everyone's got their story. Mine's no better than yours. But what I used to do is try and cram it all in and be like, yeah, so I had all these problems, joined up, then I did all these amazing things. And it's quite a challenge to get the audience to go, oh, wow, you went through all that and you came out the backside of it and did this? That's really cool. So what I've started to do is just almost like list the amazing points, like they're just bullet points. Like I'll talk a little bit, I'll talk, depending on the audience, a little bit about my time before the Marines and how I struggled there. I'll talk loosely but in depth about situations within the Marines, but make it relevant to the audience so they can relate to the experience themselves in some way or another. And then I'll kind of list the successes and like, yeah, and since then I've written a book, I've worked with England, I've been online with Simon Sinek, I've been on Diary of a CEO and Danny's
Pitchmasters.
I was literally about to say it. Yeah, absolutely blocked me on that one. I was about to say, and Danny's Pitchmasters.
Some people don't introduce themselves at all past their name. They say, hi, I'm Danny, and now let's talk about the product. And I think it's an important point to make that no one else so far on Pitchmasters has made, which is making sure in your own introduction that you are not overly humble so that people can hear immediately the kinds of achievements and experience you've got, so you can set them up immediately with some kind of level of credibility and trust in you.
It's a really interesting point, and it's something that I contended with for ages, and then I got myself into quite a confident place to be proud. That's a really big part as well about being confident is proud of who you've become or what you've become. I'm just proud that I have 2 children. Everyone, I get it all the time. Like, oh, you've been on this, or you've been on that, or you've done this, you've done that. It's like, it doesn't matter. I've got 2 wonderful children. That's, once we finish this podcast, I'll close the laptop for the next few hours because when I go to bed, I'll get a little bit of time extra in. And we'll go to McDonald's and we'll just live like normal people. And we are normal people. And that's what I'm proud of. So everything else to me is just, it's easy. I can be confident about what I've achieved but not have an overinflated ego with it. And the reason I want to explain my story to people and get them invested in me is I want you to know that I'm credible, but also you can just get on with me and I'm approachable and we can have a conversation. More often than not, most people don't give a shit about your product unless it is like solving your absolute number one problem that you can't sleep at all. They are just buying a product from you. And in the business world, most people are just buying products from people to solve probably an issue that they've been told to go and solve, And I look at this, I look at our product, I'm so proud of it, but it's got a bloody long way to go before I could sit there and be like, that is what I imagined it would be from the start. And so everyone has, to a degree, that problem, and everyone's got an uphill battle of convincing people of your product value and why you're better than the rest, etc. But like you said, they buy from people. They buy from real people with real stories. And it's like the car salesman example. If the car salesman is like, hey, welcome to my car salesman shop. This is this car here. It's only got 3 wheels. It's a rust bucket. And then sells you the pretty crap car. You're on the fence. You're like, come on, your trousers don't even fit. You're just trying to sell me something so you can get commission. And the car looks like crap. You're giving me all the spec, all this stuff. But if he gave you a story about how humbly he used to be a Formula 3 driver and his passion is cars, he just loves cars. And all his life he's been around racing and he misses it. The emotion, the play of emotion. I'm a car salesman now. I really miss what I used to do, but I enjoy seeing people get satisfaction from buying cars from me. And I love watching them just drive off the forecourt and carrying on down the road. Even if it's a rust bucket, you're like, take my money. Or like, let's talk a bit further about this thing. It's only got 3 wheels, but screw it, I'll buy it anyway. It's not the product, it's the person that you're buying from. And I think when people are trying to influence others to do something, what can you give them? Don't ask for their money. What can you give them in return? What can I do for you? How can I solve some of your problems? There's ways of positioning your product, but before then, let them know that you're a great person. Let them know you're credible. Speak with influence. Speak with authority. Present yourself well, but don't be intimidating. Really, there's something I've really tried to work on is be aware of my body language. Like it's traditional to fold your arms in the Marines and always have your arms folded because you're actually warming your hands most of the time.
Never in your pockets, right?
Never in your pockets, unless anyone's not looking. But you're always trying to hold, like, warm yourself up, and the natural pose is arms folded. So that's a really comfortable place for me to be. But when I'm talking to people, and I'm like, I'm gonna tell you something, and I got my arms folded, they have to open up, and I'm constantly working on my body language. But going back to that point is get people invested in you. Don't get them invested in your product. Get them invested in you. Let them like you. Tell your story. Bring your emotion to the conversation of why the widget solves your problem and you love using it because of this and I get more sleep, whatever. But sell that story to that individual through what you are, who you are. They won't care to a degree what the price is or how long the contract is. They'll want to talk to you more. And this is for me why we have to be so good at what we do at Loopin is I need to pitch to the buyer, but then when I've got the B2B to C, the user who's going to be checking in how they feel and supporting one another on the platform and doing all these different things to create more cohesive and connected working environments, I need to convince them that they need to use the product. But I can't sell them the product and go, you must check in. You must be off private mode because otherwise it doesn't really work that well. I tell you what, I'm going to tell you a story of a time where I had to overcome a really extreme circumstance, something that you all experience yourselves, and how it made me feel afterwards. And I felt so good for doing it. Talking about how I felt was a burden lifted, and go and take them down that alleyway. And then they go, oh, by the way, you can do this on Loopin. And it's just sold indifferently. And I think it's bringing those stories and emotions in that just get people going, I don't really know what they're selling. I just want to be in the room with that person a little bit longer.
So let's talk about Loopin for a second. So you founded it with Anthony Thompson, co-founder. He actually messaged me on LinkedIn today.
Did he? I said we were speaking. I knew he would. He always chases. Tomo, if you're listening, stop chasing everyone that I talk to. Anyway.
No, I like him. I had a good chat with him, actually. He said...
He's like, when's my episode?
No, he didn't. He didn't say that. He said, ask Ben about the time that he booked them into a crack den hotel. And I thought, all right, I'll ask him that one.
Right, this is okay. This is a problem we've been having for some time. You know, you get some investment in, and you got to watch the funds and all this type of stuff. So I get quite frugal. And back when we didn't actually have investment, but when we first started our original business, which was coaching and consulting into companies' leadership development, etc., I took the responsibility on one day to book the hotel, and it was usually Tomo, that's his nickname, who booked the hotels. And I was like, mate, you relax, you chill. I'll book this one. And we were going up to Birmingham, and this is why my wife sorts our holidays out as well, because I just do Google. I scroll by the ads, and then I'll pick the cheapest.
Yeah.
And I saw this. It looked beautiful, to be fair, this hotel, and it was like £22 for the night for the both of us. And I was like, what a deal! I didn't just didn't marry it up. I was like, what a deal! So I booked it, and then we went up to Birmingham, and we went round all our meetings, and then someone was like, where are you staying tonight? And I was like, we're staying at what was it called? It was called it was even a horrible name. It was like the Ratterton or something. And they were like, the where? The Ratterton, something like that. And they're like, oh, not heard of that. Where's that? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Somewhere we'll put it in sat nav later. Don't know where that is. Anyway, we pull up to this hotel later that evening. You know, a long day of meetings. You just want to get your head down and go to sleep. And we turned up to this place. I've been in worse places in combat situations than this dilapidated building where we walked through, and the reception stunk of shit. And that was like the first moment to walk away, but we didn't. And Tomo's going, is this definitely the right place? I was like, yeah, definitely the right place. And the price marries up. So we went over to reception, and we parted with our £22, I think. And they were like, you got 2 rooms? It's like 11 quid a night. We're like, okay. Went upstairs, and all these like hotel room doors were open as we're walking down this corridor, this hallway, all open. Like, and then as we walked by, there were like people just sat on their beds, and like they'd look out, and they were like, all right, and be like, you right? And every single one looked like prison cells. Then we got in our room. There was shit in our kettle. There's mold all up the wall. The lights didn't work. And Tomo's like, really? I'm like, mate, it's a bed for the night. And he was like, okay. So we went out that evening. We came back to our wonderful rooms and went to sleep. And all through the night, you could hear like banging and shouting down the corridor. I literally like put a chair up against the door and had my duvet right up to my eyes, and you could hear people like screaming at one another. And the next morning, we kind of met at the corridor. Like, how'd you sleep? So I didn't sleep very well at all. And then that day, having meetings, we bumped into someone we know, and they're like, "Where did you stay last night?" We said this particular place, and they were like, "Why did you stay there?" And we were like, "Oh, it's cheap." They were
it's £11.
They were like, "That's where they take crack addicts off the street to put into rooms so they have a place to sleep for the night." And I was like, that explains a lot now.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I thought he would ask a more intuitive question around what would listeners like to know about fear, etc. But
no, he didn't. But he did ask me one other thing, and then I promise we'll actually talk about Loopin before we close. But I'm just intrigued. He said, get him to tell you about the merger proposal for Gareth Southgate.
Oh my god! Oh, this is perfect. I completely forgot about why this would be of use. I can see why he's told you. Oh, so we tried to acquire Gareth Southgate.
I love this story already.
So, right. So this is early door. I should use this more often. This is brilliant. I forgot about this. I actually found the deck for it the other week as well. I was like, did we actually write this? So yeah. So through the Football Network and doing the talk for Gareth and staying in that network, his agent Terry, who I've explained about, who's in the book, said, "Oh, like Gareth's thinking about doing some stuff in leadership." Thinking about doing some stuff in leadership, like paid talks and like building some model or something. And we're like, all right, yeah, okay, yeah. And Terry's like, well, you guys are quite close to the bone on this one. You've all worked together, football, marine mindset. Is there something we could pull together? Literally left it at that. There was no mention of trying to acquire the England football manager. There was no mention of mergers. There was no mention of investment. And just for people who are still listening and are serious about business, this was at the beginning of our business days, and we do not write proposals like this at all now. So anyway, back to the set. Terry's like, just go away, lads, have a little think about it. Maybe, come back and we can talk a bit more about what it could be. And there was talk around like the Duke of Edinburgh Awards involved and all this stuff. So me and Tomo left and we're like fist bumping one another down the street. Like we've just sealed like the mega deal for something. And we're like, mate, I've got it. I know what we're going to do. So we went away. We had planning days over. I don't know what we were taking, maybe that crack hotel seeped into our blood a little bit. And we're having whiteboard sessions. We're building out this really comprehensive deck around working with Gareth and all these things. And we were like, Terry, we've got an idea. Can we come back and show you? It's like, yeah, lads, get yourself to London. Right, bring yourselves down. You could pitch to the team. Pitch, perfect. We actually did. So we're pitching to Terry and all his team who look after Gareth and lots of other famous sports stars in a room. They're all sat around this boardroom table, TV up. Anthony and I stand up, got our shirts on. We're about to nail it. All right. We are about to acquire the England football manager. So we're talking and it's shit because we don't know anything about pitching properly and it's really early doors. And we're talking about how our business, which by the way at the time was called Vanguard Global Solutions and was just the two of us and had two businesses to work with, and one of them was my mum's. And they were both in the UK and they weren't global. So there we are. We're pitching the Vanguard Global Solutions and Gareth Southgate merger. That was the title. That was the title of the deck. And they must have at that point gone, we fucked up inviting these boys back in. So then we spent the next hour pitching to Gareth Southgate's agency team about the merger between Vanguard Global Solutions, VGS for short, and Gareth Southgate, and how we're going to transform the Duke of Edinburgh Awards and all grassroots football with leadership development programs. Now, actually, the thesis was really good. The strategy was terrible. And I've got to find it. I'll send it to you, right?
I want to see this.
There was a slide which I don't think David Brent could have made any more cringy around how we'd actually pictured the merger of like England football and an arrow going to our logo, which by the way was a Spartan helmet with a wreath around it and a spear going through it.
Beautiful.
Oh, honestly. And we learned very quickly. We got Terry rung us back and yeah, lads, I don't think we're going to do
Like, what do you mean? What?
I was like,
Harry, come on,
we
man.
didn't get the deal.
That's brilliant. But if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have learned what bad looks like, what good looks like. That's why we've got to put ourselves in these situations.
Got
right?
to fail. You got to fail. Like, if you haven't tried to acquire the England football manager within your first 6 months of business,
Then what are you doing?
what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, it's a nice segue, though, because you now run a successful business with a pretty good name and everything. So tell me more about Loopin.
Yeah, so pitching Loopin, which I've become quite good at, not
Right.
pitching myself necessarily, is our mission at the company is by 2030, we'll have 1 million employees being able to predict and prevent burnout, performance, and retention risks through AI. And ultimately, what we do is we're a light touch product that takes sentiment analysis, asks you how you are, and we turn that into usable data. So we apply that to AI models that between your profile, which you set up when you start using the product, and how you feel on a regular basis, we build up a picture around you that we then help inform your manager of how to have great conversations with you, how to lead you effectively, when's the next time you need to catch up with them. You know, if they're stressed, how do you deal with an introverted, stressed person who works in hybrid and likes to communicate through email, which is everything you get through Loopin. And so layering in GPT before it went global, we had it in our roadmap to embed that type of technology in to create an AI coach in every person's pocket. So if it's just you as a new junior employee, you don't really know anyone in the team, you're a bit not used to Loopin, checking in, or what's this all about? We'll pick up on that. Say, hey, you're pretty disengaged, or use privacy. Have you thought about doing this or that? And then we help the manager. We connect the team through AI, and then ultimately, as we go through the leadership, the overall organization gets to understand itself better on a daily basis, as opposed to an irregular or dare I say dreaded engagement survey basis. And we are confident that as we progress forward over the sort of next 6 to 12 months, we're actually going to revolutionize a space that I don't think anyone really knows exists. How do you train employees in a hybrid world? What is well-being? What is HR tech? What is performance and everything? And actually, how do you begin to bring it together that, yes, it might sit under a multitude of different budgets, but ultimately what you're trying to do is connect people better in the workplace and then improve the performance of individuals, whether that's the individual employee, the manager of a team, or a leader of an organization. And I'm pretty confident we're still early stages, but I'm pretty confident we're heading in a particularly fascinating direction of how we go and do it.
No, that's great, and I agree with you that it's an untapped space. I mean, because I think it's slowly becoming the focus or a bigger focus in businesses. And I've been a consultant for 15 years now. I've seen all kind of bad things, and when someone shows that they are, I've been in pitch situations where the lead person has called in sick on the day, and I know it's because of stress and pressure, because we've all been up for 2 weeks straight, no sleep, 24/7. Can't compare it to the Marines, but it's stress, right? And they call in sick. They don't say at any point during those 2 weeks, I'm feeling under a lot of pressure, or I'm feeling really vulnerable about this. I'm feeling like my anxiety is getting the better of me. They call in sick. And then they get a huge black mark on their name because the other guys in the pitch have been totally let down, and they all know that guy's not sick. And it's just, thankfully, IBM's not like that at all. I got to put that on the record. But I've been in places where it's just a terrible culture. And I think, maybe I'm wrong and you can correct me, but I think it is probably a bigger problem with males as well. This male pride thing,
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you mentioned that about sick. Again, the military, you could never call in sick when you're on the front line. And I just to make that point, I get this quite often around, okay, so where are you really going with this? And my point always comes back to the first place we start with all the data we can do, all the AI we can do, and how we leverage those types of platforms and soft technology. But ultimately, where we start is with the employees within the teams. And we're far more used to being socially connected these days, whether that's through LinkedIn, even email. But for most people, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's LinkedIn, Facebook. We're used to that way of connecting. So, how do you bring an element of that feeling into a product like ours? And the first thing you'll see when you go into Loopin is a team activity feed. It's not a dashboard, it's an activity feed that you can scroll through on your screen, and you'll see, might say, Danny's feeling low today, stressed, kids didn't sleep. Might see next person super pumped about the meeting coming up. Now, it takes a while to tap into teams to get them used to that, but in our data, it proves it works. And the more hands-on approach we can have by talks and mentoring, the engagement goes through the roof. It's about trying to secure that psychological safety within each team. Because if you can secure psychological safety, you're going to lower burnout, because people can they feel they can say they're stressed. So they'll say they're stressed, and they'll get the support from their peers or the manager they need, hopefully, or at least the organization can provide the support. Performance will go up, and then naturally does, because they work harder for the team, they feel more committed. And then retention, people will want to stay longer within teams if they feel that the team hears them and actions taken from any data they submit. And I like to use the Marines for this example. I had a VC, I had two last year. We never really went very far with VCs in the end. I think that's a different story, but I think there has to be chemistry. I had two which actually I really got on with, and one of them said to me, "Oh, you must breeze through being a founder." I was like, "What makes you say that?" It's like, "Well, the things you've seen and been through, this must be like, is it that bad?" I was like, "It's way worse. I'd rather be in Sangin without a rifle or a helmet or body armor and no team around. That'd be a holiday, because that stress is acute and it's up and it's down. It's up." But like you just said, and interestingly, you try to immediately pitch it back to me and go, "Oh, it's not as bad as the Marines." It's like, it's way worse than the Marines. Marines is really simple. You go to war, you're either going to survive or you're going to die. Or get injured, right? They're the only two real outcomes. And the idea is to try and avoid the other two and survive. That becomes very basic. It's quite primal way of living. Just survive the situation. And the stress is acute. You're not getting bombed or shot at all the time. So it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, and then you have up cycles. What you've just described is intense periods of prolonged stress that you are just living it. And the person who's running the project is like, we're getting nearer the day, we're getting nearer the day. Oh my God, the day's arrived, I'm sick. And at no point up to that moment was there the ability to share between yourselves, "Man, this project's killing me, I feel red," but we can support one another through it. Doesn't matter if you're red, doesn't matter if you're stressed, you support one another through it. We never, I love the Queen, I've said this before, but we never did it for Queen or country. We did it for one another on the ground. That's all that mattered in the military. And we were paid nothing for doing it. You can take that thesis. People challenge me all the time. Yeah, but how do you create that in the civilian world? We all want to be part of a tribe. We all want to be part of a community. We have to be able to connect with that community. And more teams are getting better at it. We are not white or blue collar anymore. We are extremely diverse organizations where people want to belong. They want to have purpose. They want to come to work and be heard. When we have people chomping at that bit and that way of thinking, you can create the best teams. It's not perfect. Like I say, people will walk, people will chase money, but ultimately you can create those teams. And imagine running those projects from the start where you can understand how each other are and support one another. So people don't go on sick on the last day. They don't get that black mark through their name. And you actually have a cohesive team that performs at, possibly, I would argue, a higher standard than you would without knowing.
Couldn't agree with any of that more. So where can people find out more about Loopin and about your book?
So the book, you can find Commando Mindset anywhere. You can go to Penguin's website, you can Waterstones, Amazon it, Commando Mindset, and it'll come up. And then letsloopin.com. I would ask that you all wait a week before visiting our new website, as a classic founder would say.
This isn't coming out for a week, so careful.
Hopefully you're now paused and you've gone to the website. In fact, go to the website right now so you don't forget it. But yeah, let's loopin.com. You can find out more information there. If not, connect with me on LinkedIn and we can talk through there. But yeah, the more people we can visit and speak to, the bigger the problem we can solution for.
Fantastic. Ben, you are an inspiration and you've made me cry with laughter over the last hour. I appreciate you for that. I really do. You know what you're doing, and we could chat for a lot longer, but I can't have 2-hour episodes because no one will listen to them. But there you go. But before you go, any final words of wisdom for the listeners?
I used to hate speaking in front of people, and I especially used to hate speaking in front of my peers as Marines. And I found the more I worked on it, just the better I became at it. And it came down to confidence. And confidence, I believe, is shrouded in belief. The more belief you can have in yourself, even if you're going to fail at the situation, or you're going to make a bit of an arse out yourself on this pitch, don't let that knock your confidence for the next one. Learn from the failures, learn from what went wrong, learn from your Gareth Southgate acquisitions, and move forward. And the greater your belief is, the more confident you'll become. And go in there with confidence, but not arrogance. Go in there with a great ego, but not a bad ego. And let people really understand who you are as a person. I naturally have people say to me, "Oh, you're amazing. You've achieved these wonderful things." It's like, I'm a normal person which just believes in myself that I can achieve great things within my own life. And the 3 people that benefit are my 2 children and my wife. And we all have amazing stories to tell. Just, you have to dig in and find that story. And when you do, you'll always win people over. And then you can pitch whatever you want to pitch and sell them whatever you want to sell them. But find that story, be confident, believe in who you are, box the imposter when you need to, and head forward. And I think you'll tap into something completely unique and new that I never knew existed until I really started hammering away at it.
Ben, you're a legend. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you very much. Take care.
This has been another episode of Pitch Masters. Go to pitchguy.co.uk for updates and information, or search for Pitch Guy on social media for regular videos on sales, psychology, storytelling, creativity, and much more.